if I had more time, I would go into a lot of detail about this. I think I'll just say that the late 70s all the way up through the mid to 2016 when Bernie Sanders becomes a presidential candidate, socialism is more or less subcultural. This is as a matter of affectation. This is a matter of how you feel rather than your material interests as a worker. Um, so the Communist Party stays more or less hidden, even today. They're still just kind of hidden. Of course, you're allowed to be in the Communist Party, but if you're active in your union, you almost certainly have met a communist, a member of the Communist Party, especially somebody over the age of like 55. The likelihood that you're going to meet them as a communist, that's a lot less. I mean, that's much less likely because even today, that's just kind of on the down low because that's not important. Because for them, what's most important is working class self-activity. And so there's something admirable about that. But also they're lost. I mean, as far as the left is concerned, you don't notice them. The rest of the left is these kind of increasingly insignificant, smaller and smaller splinters, sects. And that's what all the 80s and 90s and the 2000s were just different street protests, activists who were like trying to, and this is where I come from, trying to make a name for yourself by making a big fuss, having a big protest, being on lots of video and so on. 2016 is a watershed moment because it proves that there are actually the audience for socialism, or at least some ideas that can be very directly connected to some conception of socialism. Because the audience is millions of people, because Bernie Sanders speaks to huge crowds, and like there's no telling how far that went, but it was very popular. So there was a major point of crisis for this kind of socialism as subculture, that the sect world, which based on the old Cold War, which has been over for a long time now, they maintain this kind of in my corner and we're going to be the real revolutionaries. And meanwhile, the rest of the working class is paying attention to our ideas. This guy Sanders, he's stolen our ideas. Whatever. Anyways, that's when you get the DSA moment. And for a little while, the DSA is very, very popular. So I went into the DSA for a while. But again, just like back in 1876, this idea of the labor movement of the working class is over here. And they're very good at doing those things. The socialist movement, the ideas people were over here. And the idea that they should be merged together, they should be married, it's just, this is a perspective that I think this is an argument that basically still has to be won. So I wrote not with a bang, but with a whimper. That's the end of my outline says that. It's like, ever since the 2020 election, ever since Bernie Sanders is no longer the principal figure of American socialism, but also now all the sects are mostly gone, socialism today is largely, it seems to be, an affectation of individuals. So if you're on Twitter, you might know a lot of socialists who have all kinds of ideas about any number of things. But the actual, the number of organized, like in-person meetings of socialists and in-person campaigns of socialists, is probably the lowest amount of them that there has ever been. I'm 40 years old. I first joined the Young Communist League when I was 15. And I'm certain that I've never lived in a time in which there was fewer opportunities to do anything as a socialist. So I guess, and again, there's so much more here. I think I'm going to shut up with this. I'm just going to say that that's why I think that there's so much that we can learn from you, because what's really needed right now is a kind of real back to basics. Like, When the first socialist group in this country was founded in 1869, their purpose was really just A, to meet each other, and B, to promote the ideas of socialism. And that's, I think, where we are today. We have to get back to meeting each other, kind of fostering this kind of basic community. And I would like to make the contention that the Cold War, which has been over now for 30 years, 34 years, is so far behind us that our differences and the different positions we might have about questions of the Cold War should matter to us about as much as the differences we might have about the Crimean War or the Peloponnesian War. These are historical moments. There's something very interesting, there's something very cool to discuss it about those things at the bar, at the pub, you know. There's no reason to make a political organization on that basis. The only real basis today is the one that we still had before us back in 1869. Yeah, I guess that's where I'm going to end. Obviously, I think there's going to be lots and lots to revisit, but that's what discussions are for.
Yeah, that's great, Jason. I feel like that thing about socialism becoming subcultural. Like, did you see recently? You know the band The Armed?
I don't think so.
They're like a kind of like Pitchfork Darling kind of band, but they opened for Bernie Sanders at like a rally he did recently. It's just like, I don't know, that just kind of speaks to that same phenomenon a little bit.
I'm writing that down. I want to check them out.
I don't really personally. I don't really get why they're so big, but I just, before we go to questions, I guess I'm going to take a little style at this moment and ask my own question. But like, I don't know if you've come across this phrase. I don't know if it's common in the States, but certainly I think in other Anglo countries, when we're trying to map on our experience, I guess, which is a more Westminster-based system in New Zealand, Australia, and the UK, obviously, and we're looking at the States, and people say something like, "Well, the Democrats aren't a Labour Party." Obviously, a Labour Party also wasn't a socialist party, but that means that at some point there was opportunity for a Labour Party, a party that was for the working class, to, not necessarily for socialism, but for the betterment of the working class against the kind of ravages of capital, to form. And I think you've kind of like discussed a little bit of why that didn't eventuate in the US, but like, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that specifically about why there isn't that kind of party now, because it seems to me like the SPA, Socialist Party of America, weren't really a Labour Party like the UK Labour Party or our Labour Party.
Right.
But also, like, you had this what do you say, impossibilism rears its head again. Like, there's this tradition of impossibilism, but it's kind of interesting because that was definitely, sorry if you can hear our dog, that was definitely an influence here in New Zealand, particularly around the turn of the century with what's called the Red Federation of Labour. A lot of quite radical Labour leaders, and it eventually culminated at a failed, what was basically a lot of people think it was the closest we got to a revolution in the early 1900s, and it was kind of syndicalist led, right? But a lot of them went into and formed the Labour Party after that, which is still radical for the time, I guess, but was obviously a lot more moderate. So I don't know. Do you have any kind of do you have any kind of thoughts in that realm about why that a formation like that never emerged in the US?
I have a few even.
Great.
So, like, I'm going back to the early days. I would say the blame is half the blame rests with socialists. The other half rests with the non-socialists. So, Samuel Gompers, when he was president of the American Federation of Labor, he very explicitly said that he's not in favor of a workers' party, of a labor party. He said that I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican. I'm for labor. But he didn't mean like I'm for a Labor Party. He meant whichever one of the two parties is going to give us the best deal, that's one we're going to support. And so that was a very early, ethic philosophy of the labor movement. And then to counter it, the socialists were split between either people like Daniel De Leon, who would be in favor of a Labor Party. In fact, that's why we had the Socialist Labor Party. But only if everybody was in the Socialist Labor Party and already accepted his vision of socialism, or his understanding of what would be necessary to make Marx's vision come to fruition. And then Eugene Debs and Victor Berger and Morris Hillquit and this generation of socialist leaders just kind of accepted that socialism was to be the political expression of the will of labor, and that the unions were supposed to be the material expression. The Debs spoke of a two-armed labor movement. The left arm, this is the party. The right arm is the unions. They fight together. I think a better way to think of it would be like, this is the brain is the party, and then these are the unions. These are all part of the same body. And to his credit, Debs did change his mind about this once he saw how destructive various combat for ideas might be when the party splits into three, and then 120,000 of the party members just kind of disappear. And Debs says, okay, fine, this is obviously a terrible mistake. And that's where the Conference for Progressive Political Action is like this hoped for kind of, we'll get everybody back together into one, more or less the same political formation. We'll have communists on one side, we'll have socialists over here, whatever. But we can all agree programmatically to like what we're going to accomplish in this election. What are we going to accomplish in this, given period? And then from here on out, it's just like successive iterations of the same basic problems of a small group of us. We get some idea that like, oh, we finally have it. We finally have the wind in our sails. And then we can't countenance the idea of giving up this thing we're proud of. So we let our initial successes get to our heads, and they become reasons to not move on to second and third gears. So we just never move past our first. We never break out, is really what I mean. And that happens over and over and over again, all throughout the last century and a half, that American socialism never becomes hegemonic, because once it becomes prominent, the idea of, watering down whatever, the thing that you're most proud of, it's just too much to stomach.